All right, everybody, it's that time again. It's FranchisOR Bust time. We're coming at you with a new look. I feel like we're looking good. We're feeling good. Would you agree, Katie?
We are looking good. At least you are.
Well, that's right. I'm looking good for sure, and that's something that that's my best leg to stand on because the point of this discussion today is not about me. It's about our special guest, as always. And today we've got Bill McPherson with Alpha Graphics. Bill is going to talk to us about the world of franchising as he sees it and how to make sure that folks are engaged in the space and what they can expect with the Alpha Graphics team. So, Bill, super excited to have you. How are you?
No, I'm doing great. I appreciate it. Really excited to be here.
Absolutely. So, Bill, if you wouldn't mind, just briefly tell us a little bit about Alpha Graphics, what you guys do, maybe the demo that you serve, and then we'll dig a little deeper into the brand and what folks who might be listening could learn a little more about in case they might be interested.
Yeah, absolutely. So Alpha Graphics has been around about 51 years, so very storied brand, been a leader in the print, marketing, science space for much of that time. The brand has evolved over the last several years to what we call a full service consultative marketing solution provider. So as we get into our discussion, you'll hear that we're much more than a sign shop or a print shop or what have you, but because today, through technology and through our production capabilities, we can do everything, every type of print and sign you can think of, but also SEO, SEM, website development, email campaigns, complete brand makeovers. So really one of our huge differentiators for our franchise owners is going to market, as that full consultative marketing solution.
Outstanding. And that really is a big key, I think, in the franchise space in terms of attracting someone to your brand. Really, what is the breadth of service that you offer and how are you going to be able to impact, their ability to service their customers and be successful? So maybe let's kind of, just dive straight into that. Let's say someone is, coming to the brand, or maybe they've listened to this podcast or they've heard about Alpha Graphics, et cetera, and they think to themselves, I've always wanted to get into my own business. I've always wanted to, maybe leave the job I'm in and strike out on my own. What would you, kind of mention to them in terms of Alpha Graphics and what type of ability they're going to have to succeed in working with you all and working as a franchisee?
Well, I think first, we do get a lot of potential candidates that have been very successful in corporate America. So they've managed teams and budgets and progressed through their corporate ladder, if you will. And so we often hear when they're going through the due diligence that they say to us, God, I'm tired of making money for other people. I want to control my future more. I want to build wealth. I want to build something to pass on to my son or daughter. And so that's a typical MO for somebody that we get that's in that corporate America role, right? And so then we start to, one of the first things we tell them is, sure, we understand, where you're coming from. We maybe understand some of the intrepidation because these folks have been used to a consistent paycheck, health benefits, support from other departments like IT and HR and so forth. That's very different, as you guys know, to branching out on your own and being an entrepreneur, franchisee. So we certainly want to acknowledge that, understand where they're coming from, and then we start taking them through our due diligence process.
So that is a pretty consistent fear that goes around with a lot of folks that are just getting into the franchise world, into the space. Is there anything in particular that you kind of guide them on to say, hey, I know it's just like you mentioned, there's some fear factor there and the things that are going on. Here's some particulars to kind of alleviate some of that fear and help them take that step into joining the Alpha Graphics brand.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think the first thing is to acknowledge it. Every entrepreneur that's walked in their shoes before them has likely had this fear and intrepidation. If they didn't, it's not normal. So one, putting it out there, right? Being very candid, very transparent. And then, we often ask the candidate to envision themselves, where are they going to be in 2 to 3 years? So they're reaching out to Alpha Graphics, to our team, because of X, Y, and Z. These are the things they want to do differently, right? But then they have fear and intrepidation. Well, where are you going to be in 2 to 3 years? If you stay with corporate America, yeah, you've got your paycheck, you got your benefits, your 401k may go up, down, sideways, depending on the economy, right? But If you strike out and become an entrepreneur and build a business and look at 2 to 3 years later, now you've got an asset, a business, you're building wealth, you're taking control of your future, right? You're building something for your children. So we try to have them envision, if I go down this pathway in 2 or 3 years versus if I go down this pathway in 2 to 3 years. And then once they start thinking, yeah, I need to go down to be an entrepreneur down that pathway, then how does Alpha Graphics help them along the way with support in every facet of their business, from sales to marketing to HR to training, et cetera? Because if they're coming from that corporate America environment, they've typically had those levels of support. So we can be tangential and provide that to them as a strong franchisor that's been doing this for 51 years.
Absolutely. And that's such a major factor in the success of a franchisee, in particular a new franchisee, is relying upon a model that's consistent and works, which was the whole point of getting into franchising, but also relying upon the strength of the franchisor and the kind of the systems and structures that the franchisor has created. Maybe break down just a couple of things that a new franchisee who might be leaving their corporate job could expect to say, okay, this is the type of system or support that I can expect from the franchisor if I were to join the Alpha Graphics team.
Yeah. And like we said, we've been doing this long enough to know to refine the model. We've certainly made mistakes over the years and corrected those. So we think we have a pretty darn good model. And so everything from their initial onboarding, we have a phenomenal learning and development team headed by Clayne Udi. And it's really interesting because of the pandemic. That's one of the areas that had to pivot quite a bit, that in marketing, because people weren't traveling. So how were we delivering this learning and onboarding development? So the whole curriculum got revamped over the last 2 years. It's phenomenal. So they're going to see that right away. But then also the marketing, right? Critical, right? So how have we gone through the pandemic and not only come out the other side, but have a record year in 2022? So we had a record year. Our average unit volume is about $1.3 million across the U.S., higher than pre-COVID. So there's reasons for that. And it is the training, the learning development, the marketing, et cetera. I think one of the other things that resonates with our particular candidates to look at this brand is vision and strategy. So the kind of candidates that are looking at an Alpha Graphics, again, have typically been in middle to senior management. So they've done budgets, strategic planning, et cetera. We have what we call a net vision process, where we've created a 5-year strategic plan by our executive leadership team for the Alpha Graphics brand. We're actually in year 4 of that 5-year period. And then next year, we'll do another 3 to 5 year strategic vision for the brand. A lot of franchisors don't do that. And that seems to resonate very well with the type of candidates that are looking at Alpha Graphics.
Certainly the structure that you're describing is something that, someone coming from more of a job scenario would feel a lot more comfortable with, and understanding what is that structure, and also just strong leadership. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Maybe speak to unpack that just a little bit more. So you mentioned you definitely get them involved. They learn about the brand. They understand how you're being marketed, so that you can drive those unit volume sales, which is obviously attractive to them and super important.
Yep.
But then, strong leadership too, really understanding and having access to what the leadership structure is and the vision is. Maybe, and then you mentioned that the 3 to 5 years is awesome, but maybe unpack that a little further.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I've been in franchise leadership 29 years. And if you look at the rest of my colleagues, the executive team combined, we have about 260 years in franchising and print and marketing. So 260 years. So it's a very, very tenured leadership team. We've built very successful brands before this brand. We've made mistakes. We've refined those mistakes. So I think that's very appealing to a potential candidate looking to make that move. But then also for them to get plugged into the Alpha Graphics network. So one of the things we tout very strongly from day one of their due diligence all the way through when they decide to join the brand is to be connected with our franchise owners. So we just talked about the leadership team and all the things we're doing as the franchisor, but we've got owners in our system 25, 30, 35 years. We've got owners in our system that have passed it down to second generation. That is invaluable. So if Trevor wants to pick up the phone or email or go by another Alpha Graphics center because you're new and say, hey, I'm new, how do I do this? How do I print this job? What vendor do I call? That's invaluable for them to be plugged into the network. So we tout from day one. Another way to say it is I tell people the worst thing you can do is join a franchise, go through our initial training, and then we don't hear from you. That's the worst thing you can do, because you're not taking advantage of the network and the franchise organization. Does that make sense?
Katie, coming from a standpoint of someone who, is in a work environment with a job, et cetera, how important is it to be able to reach out to your peers, the other folks that are doing similar work to you, to understand how to increase your own capabilities and what you do?
You're asking me?
Yeah, I'm asking you.
Yeah, I mean, it's crucial to be able to step out of my door and go chat with my coworkers and bounce ideas off of them. Absolutely. Hey, all you listeners out there. This episode of FranchisOR Bust is brought to you by StackAdapt, the industry-leading programmatic advertising platform, because speed makes the difference. Trevor, how long have we been using StackAdapt here at LSM?
We've been using StackAdapt for a few years now, and I got to say, it's been an absolute breath of fresh air. We've used many programmatic platforms over the years for our franchise brands, and StackAdapt far and away exceeds them all.
I agree. We are so grateful for their partnership and their sponsorship. So please enjoy this episode of FranchisOR Bust.
Getting a sense of that camaraderie, that you're all doing the same thing, you're all going toward a similar goal. I think that would be a major factor in alleviating some of the stress or some of the fear that someone who's coming from that corporate environment and jumping into, okay, I'm going to be doing my own thing. It's like you mentioned, Bill, they are doing their own thing, but they've also got this vast network of people who've already done it, which is outstanding.
Yeah, and you mentioned, we were talking a little bit earlier about culture, and that is probably the most important thing for us. Every franchisor worth their salt that's been around a period of time is going to screen on financial capability. Is the market that Trevor wants available? Do a background check, felony, misdemeanor, all that. We do all that as well. But the cultural fit is the most important thing for us. We take the candidate through a very pragmatic, very transparent due diligence process. We don't sugarcoat things. If people are going to go into this, we want them to understand the good, bad, and the ugly. It's a big decision. And we tell them straight up, even if they like the financial return on investment, the brand, the support, if they don't feel through the process that there's a good cultural alignment with the senior management team and the other franchisees, we flat out tell them, do not move forward, even if they want to sign an agreement. Because to us, this is like a marriage. And the way you get through things like a pandemic is if you're culturally aligned. If you're not culturally aligned, it gets very problematic.
I think that is extremely well said, and something we touch on a lot on the show, because it's fundamental to business.
Yeah.
We talk about franchise brands, and sometimes they can have a lot of just fingers out there in terms of just, there's so much going on. There's so many moving pieces. It's a lot. And you have a lot of different owners, and different owners have different opinions and all these things that happen. So establishing that core culture and that kind of fundamental culture of, this is the business, this is the brand, we all move in this direction. Well,
and then to your point earlier, how do you get the franchisee to assimilate that culture in their franchise location, so that as we're touching consumers and customers all across the United States, that there's this same feel and culture, almost like a Chick-fil-A, right? So how do we embody that culture, help our franchisees embody that in their centers as well, which is part of the learning and development and part of what they go through as they're making their decision to join the Alpha Graphics brand.
I would think too that for folks that are coming from from an environment where they've been successful, they've done well, they can see the value in that. And most likely, I would also say that folks have been, if they've been in the corporate world for a while, they've probably seen what a bad culture looks like.
Oh, yeah.
And so it would be very important, and I think very attractive to them to understand, this is the culture that we know works at Alpha Graphics. This is the way we present ourselves to the consumer, and this is how we help our employees, et cetera.
Yeah, one of our taglines worldwide, our parent company is MBE Worldwide, based in Milan, Italy, and they own about 9 brands, including Alpha Graphics. And one of our mantras is called People Possible. And so it's extremely important for us all across the globe. We have over 3,000 franchise locations in over 50 countries amongst all of our brands. but that common theme about people possible. So, for example, Alpha Graphics is a very technology laden business model. Technology is changing quite a bit. If you look at print today versus what it was 10 years ago, it's changed dramatically. But what we cannot forget is the relationship side of it and the people side of it and the customer service side of it. Because our customer, our target customer and our valued customer is not somebody that's going to Vistaprint for 100 business cards. It's that consultative, hey, we're doing a trade show, we've got a budget of X, we don't really know what we need, and then we help them provide the solution. And that's where the people come in, the customer service side, the relationship.
And I would imagine that that's, something that you guys hammer in a lot in the learning and development phase, and really teach the incoming franchisee just the true importance of that and value. Because you're right, they could be looking, sometimes franchisees look at things that are potential ones. And it sounds like you do a great job of weeding them out by focusing on the culture, but they could look at things and say, all right, what are the unit economics? And
Yep.
this is kind of what I want to do, but really guiding them into the space of, well, that's unit economics for people who are successful in paying attention to our cultural standards, right? I mean, maybe speak more on that, because you have some franchisees and systems who do really well, and some who maybe can potentially lag behind. I imagine in the case of Alpha Graphics, as it is with many other brands, the ones that do really well really adopt that philosophy.
Oh, without a doubt. If you look at our top 25% performers year in and year out, one, they're extremely engaged in the network. They're extremely engaged with the executive team as far as where this brand is going. But also, they're following the model, they're adopting the culture. And you're right. You have some owners that when they're looking at the business model, so before they become a franchisee, they'll just look at the financial return, the unit economics. They'll look at our franchise disclosure document. We have a very strong item 19, and they'll say, wow, this looks great. But like I said earlier, we tell them when they come to a discovery day in Denver, which is the last step in our process, and they're excited and they want to move forward. If we get a feel that it's just because of the unit economics or the return on investment versus the culture and what it takes to build this business. Look, the first year, our owners do extremely well, far better than anybody else in this space. But the first year is tough. It's hard emotionally, it's hard financially, et cetera. They have to be prepared for that to get to the point, like you say, where the unit economics are making sense. And part of that is following a successful model and adopting the culture, or they never get to the positive unit economics.
I think that's a phenomenal point, and one that gets occasionally lost, I think, in the shuffle in the franchise space, is that they see the success. They see people who are multi-unit owners. They see people who, doing well. The brand itself is doing well, has good brand recognition. They think, well, I'll just buy into that, or I'll just, you could think to yourself, well, it could never fail if I just buy a Subway or I just buy a Chick-fil-A, surely right. I'll succeed.
Right.
But there's more to it. Like you mentioned, you really got to follow the plan and hustle.
Yeah. to your point, and I'm sure we've all experienced this as a consumer, I've got a QSR franchise brand that's near us where we moved from Denver, and that similar brand was also in Texas where we moved from. So same brand, right? Franchise model, but a tale of two stories, right? So you go into one and the orders were always wrong, the food was cold, poor customer service. Same brand, different city, exceptional. You'd want to go there again, et cetera. Well, it comes down to the franchisee. So you're right. You can't just say, well, I'll just buy this and it's location, I'll do well. You have to execute as the franchisee. And those differentiators, those points of differentiation that make that brand stand out, if you don't execute that, you're dead.
Yeah, it truly is. It truly is a situation where they have to behave like an entrepreneur and really embrace the idea that this is their business and to go for it and start to run it and adopt the culture and move strong. So we've talked about how we've alleviated the fears of the potential candidate to come over. They're leaving their job. They understand the structure you have, the culture, the things that are massively important to get them to be successful. So let's say they have come over and they've left their job. What have you noticed from these folks? Are they happy? Or are they buying into the idea later to say, hey, Bill, I'm so glad I made that decision? Yeah,
we typically hear the common thing that we hear is, I wish I would have done this sooner. And that's pretty common. It's a big decision. And taking one step back, one thing I didn't mention is it's very important for us to get the spouse, if there's a spouse, on board in this due diligence with this decision as soon as possible. Because of the magnitude of this decision, financially, change in lifestyle, et cetera, it affects the whole family. And if the spouse isn't on board, they're never going to make that leap. If the spouse is on board, we take them through the due diligence, we ease their fears, we show them all the support, all the things we've talked about, 90%, maybe more. We talk to them at conference, the year later, 2 years later. I wish I would have done this sooner. Wish I would have done it sooner.
I like that you bring the point up. So the retrospect kind of excitement is there, but also the point you made about this is really a family decision. I mean, this is a big decision for the majority of folks that are going to be getting into it. This is a big family decision, and like you mentioned, they've probably been kind of working and fighting hard for years to get into the position they're at, and now all of a sudden they go home and they say, "Hey, by the way, I think we're going to give all that up and go this direction."
We hear about that. Sorry to interrupt. We hear about that a lot, Trevor, don't we? I mean, like with YPO, for instance, when they recommend having your spouse get involved with some groups as well.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like any major, whether it's a franchise brand or like a major networking event or not event, but group, et cetera, they all would say, hey, to really be successful, get the unit involved, get the family unit involved to really buy in.
Yeah, we tell folks as we're going through the due diligence, if we know that there's a spouse or a significant other or a business partner, to try to engage them as early on in the process. And if we get pushback, it's not uncommon to say, well, no, my husband or my wife's on board. Don't worry about it. I've already talked to him or her. Well, not really, right? And because the analogy that we use is say, okay, let me make sure I understand. If you were going to go buy a house for $300,000, whatever the typical investment is for the franchise all in, are you saying that you would make that decision without your spouse ever seeing the house or knowing what you're doing? And then the light bulb goes on. They say, well, no. Okay, then we need to involve your spouse or significant other. This is a big decision.
Certainly not the ones that want to stay partners.
That's right. That's right.
They don't make decisions that way.
No.
Well, that's outstanding, Bill. So, so many years of success in the franchise space. The wisdom behind your words are not based on anything other than experience, which is why they're certainly valuable to listen to. So, we've been able to talk about how we're getting folks over, helping them understand, alleviating their concerns, alleviating their fears. And then in retrospect, they're so happy that they did it. Talk for a minute just in general then about what the future holds for Alpha Graphics. Are you guys, you had your best year ever in 22, which is outstanding. Congratulations.
Yep.
Where do we see things going for the next few years?
Well, we're very excited to build upon last year. Our franchisees are doing a phenomenal job. Obviously, my team is responsible for adding new owners to the brand across the country to continue to build brand awareness. So we're excited. I think from a franchise development standpoint, things have gotten back to kind of 2019 levels as far as people once again looking at businesses and so forth. We still face some of the same challenges as far as interest rates and funding and so forth. But as a brand, our franchisees coming off a record year, we've got some really exciting new technology things that are coming to fruition very, very quickly. That'll be further differentiators for us in the space that our franchisees can execute on. We're launching an e-commerce platform in the next few weeks. So really exciting stuff. And I think that speaks to not only pre-pandemic, during pandemic, and now, is that one of the things we take pride on and our franchisees, I think, really align with is that we, without a doubt, are thought leaders in this space. We're very proactive, not reactionary to technology, things, effects of a pandemic, shortages on supplies. How can we leverage purchasing relationships? We're not reactive. We're very proactive and thought leaders in this space. And that's one of the things that appeals to our franchisees to align with a franchisor that's in that position.
Absolutely. Well, Bill, it's been amazing to get to know you and your vision for the brand, but also the way that you're able to get those folks who, have spent many, many years building themselves up to make that leap over into the franchise world. And as you say, once they have done that, accomplished it, and look back, they just think to themselves, man, I wish I would have done it sooner.
Yeah.
So for anybody out there listening, as you're sitting there and you're, at your work and you're thinking to yourself, why I've always thought about franchising. You heard it from Bill. Could be an amazing thing for you and your future and your family. So, Bill, we really appreciate you, and I'll leave you with any final words that you've got.
No, I'm excited. I really appreciate the time with you guys. You guys have a blessed weekend, and I'm happy to be a part of the show.
Excellent. Thank you so much, and we will see you on the next. What is it, Katie?
Franchise or Bust.
Buddy.